Hey, how's everybody doing today? So this is Professor Ellis again for English 2575 Technical Writing. And if you believe it or not, this is our fifth week lecture. So we're well underway with the course and the different types of documents and research that we're making um, that hopefully is going to together provide you a good foundational basis for some of the writing that you're going to be called on to do in the workplace. And obviously, through all of this work that you're doing, improving your writing skill and then also your collaboration skill, both through the peer review work that you guys have been doing a really good job on. I appreciate the professionalism that I've seen in a lot of those emails that you guys have been exchanging. But then also, once we get to the collaborative project, where you're going to have more of an opportunity to work side by side, albeit virtually, with some of your classmates on a much more extended and expansive project. But we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We're going to scale it back to where we are right now, which is you all have been turning in your 500-word summary project. I've just been glancing over those as they've been coming in, and I've been impressed that you guys have been turning it in on time for the most part. The work looks pretty good. I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. But I'll need to take a little bit more time to actually delve into them and then begin giving you feedback and a grade on those. There's still time if some of you still haven't turned in your 500-word article summary project. So I don't want anybody to throw up their hands and just give up at this point. Please don't, because like I said at the very beginning, I want us all to be successful in this class. And sometimes that may mean that you need a little extra time, but all I want you to do is drop me an email. Let me know what's going on so that we can work together to make sure that we keep you on track. And some of you have done that, and I appreciate that. That's something that, again, is not just something for my benefit so that I know what's going on, in terms of like your ability to do the work in the class, because a lot of things can come up, which I totally understand. But it's also really good practice for you once you're in the workplace, because it's absolutely imperative that you coordinate and communicate with your coworkers, as well as a manager or managers that you also have to work with, so that everybody's on the same page, because real life happens and it can cause interruptions or other types of issues in the workplace. But by and large, I think if you're always mindful of other people, and when I say mindful, you're thinking about how to make sure you getting held up on something doesn't hold up your coworkers or the other work or objectives of your business, or simply just to let people know that you need that extra 30 minutes to fulfill a deadline, or you need an extra day because you're sick, whatever it might be. Keeping the communication lines open is obviously far better than just simply clamming up and not saying anything, because then people don't know what the hell's going on, and that's not good for anybody. So use this class, as practice for that. And that's why I built it in. That's why I offer that as an option to you all, to just keep me in the loop on things, no matter what may be going on. And I'm not asking, just to be clear on this, if something comes up that may cause you to need an extra week to complete an assignment or whatever it might be, you don't necessarily have to tell me everything that's going on. It's not my place to check up on you. I mean, we are all adults here, and I respect you all. So don't worry about doctor's notes or any of that kind of stuff. If something honestly is going on that causes some sort of impact on your performance in the class, all you got to do is let me know that something's going on and leave it at that. So don't think that this is something that you got to spill your guts or say things that you would be uncomfortable sharing with me. Okay, I'm not asking you to do that, but I do want you to have the communication lines open. So if something comes up, just simply let me know that something's going on outside of our class that you don't have control over, that you're just asking for a little more time, or you need to work with me to develop a plan, which I can also do with you. Because again, by the time we get to the end of the semester, I want everybody to be sailing on smooth seas, and you'll be working toward a goal of getting a really good grade in the class. And I think that we can do that by accommodating one another. And now with these projects, I'll get grades back to you as soon as I can. The way that'll work is there's a plugin on OpenLab that allows me to put grades and comments for assignments. And I'm just going to scroll down. Yeah, so here I am on our OpenLab site. And if you look over here on the left, so I'm going to scroll down, like here's the menu, scroll down. Here I gave you a navigation reminder to make sure that you scroll past whatever the first stuff is to make sure you don't ever miss anything. Scroll past that. And then there's this guy right here, course gradebook, check your grade. Once I start putting in grades, you should be able to click that and it'll bring up like what are your grades so far on the major assignments. Now with the smaller like weekly writing assignments, that's something that I don't give like a grade on. All I'm looking for is best effort on that. So I'm not going to nickel and dime you on grades for like these weekly writing assignments, because what I know and a lot of research has shown me is that by doing these regular writing assignments, it's something that automatically improves your own writing ability. It's not something you can like save for like say like the last few days of class and just do it all at once and expect to get like some sort of great benefit from it. It's by breaking these projects down into small chunks and doing them incrementally over time is what allows your brain to adjust and change from those experiences, so you become more confident and more adept at doing that kind of writing that we're doing in the regular writing each week. So for those things, all I'm looking for is best effort always. If I think that there's a question about like what you're submitting, I'll reach out to you individually and ask you like what gives. But now there is a way you can always check to make sure that you've completed those assignments so that you always get full credit, right? So what we'll do is let's scroll back up to the top of our OpenLab site. And so at the top, I think I'd mentioned this just kind of briefly that you had access to this. But if you mouse over the title here, after you've logged in, obviously, into OpenLab, you'll have this menu bar at the top, and mouse over where it says ENG 2575 Technical Writing. You'll have this option for Dashboard. Click that. Now, Dashboard gives you access to the posts that you've already turned in, as well as the comments. And usually for the weekly writing assignments, I'm asking you to do comments on different posts that I give you. Now, in some cases, the weekly writing is simply doing the peer review work, which there's the email record of that. But for those things that you turn into OpenLab as a comment to find out what you've done and turned in successfully, is if you look over here on the left, there's this link for comments, or here in the middle at a glance, there's a link for comments. So you can click either one of those. And when you click that, you're going to see everything come up for the comments. Now, from the student view, I can't remember if you can see all the comments or if you can only see your own. If you see other people's comments here, that's fine, because obviously they're public on our OpenLab site. But then to see your own, let's say Leah's here. She's second, so we don't see her at the very landing. You can type in your name in this search box over here on the right and then click Search Comments, and then it's going to bring up your name, and it's going to show you how many comments you've had approved, which would be how many that you've turned in. Although the number could be inflated if you accidentally hit submit twice, and then that caused multiple postings. But you can scroll down and see where they've been turned in. So this comment that Leah turned in, and I apologize, Leah, for calling you out, but you're doing great work in the class. But you can see here in response to, there's the weekly writing assignment week 4. And these are actually ones that have just LIA, the name posted in there. So I'm scrolling down to find the other one. Here's the other one that got turned in. weekly writing assignment week 2. And so you can see that got turned in. So whenever you look for your name, you may want to actually type in the first part of your email address. That way, for sure, it's only going to pull up your comments and not things that may have the same letters that show up in your name that may appear in other words. Because this search is not as intelligent as, like, say, the Google search box, right? It gives you exactly what you look for. So in this case, I typed in LIA, and that brought up a lot of different things. So just type in maybe your username for your email address, hit enter, and that'll bring up your comments, and you'll see which ones you've successfully completed and turned in. And if there's any question about that, just reach out to me, send me an email. But I want you to have the tools to always follow up on your own work, your own progress. I'm going to go back to our site. Here we are. Now, the reason why I want you to watch and keep track of the work that you do, this is something that I know from personal experience, and other people that are professionals recommend people do this, is that you always need to keep track and stock of the work that you do, all the tasks that you complete, all of the different projects that you contribute to. Keep a record of that. It could be something that you type up on your computer at home. It could be something you keep in a notebook. But the idea is you keep track of that, keep track of dates when you did those different tasks, you worked on those different assignments, when you completed those different projects, because you want to always have that record available for a number of reasons. One is if, like, say, a superior were to ever call you out and say you didn't do X, if you have in your logbook your record of all the things you've done, you would be able to come back and say, no, I have a record here that I did that. And maybe you might reference an email that you sent, or maybe a file you saved. That way you have proof that you actually did this thing that someone else is either saying you didn't do or that they had overlooked, okay? Another thing that might be useful for keeping track of that kind of stuff is whenever you go up for any kind of evaluation. Depending on where you work, you might have quarterly evaluations, biannual evaluations, annual evaluations, and these are where you sit down usually with a superior, a manager, and they're going to talk with you about your work. And they're probably already calculated all kinds of information about the work that you've done, the things that were great, the things that were deficient, whatever they might be. But by having a logbook that you can look over and kind of see all the things you've done, confirm the things that you've done, when you go into that review, if there's a need for rebutting something that may be a strike against you, you would have some kind of record keeping to make a stronger case than simply saying, oh no, I know I helped with that. Well, the logbook and any supporting evidence helps you corroborate what you're saying you actually did. So it's a way of protecting yourself, and that's really important, especially as both the workloads of managers as well as anybody is increasing. So there's always the possibility people can make mistakes, but also if there's ever an issue of any kind of harassment or anything like that, where you're maybe concerned someone is saying things that aren't true, you always have that record and you protect yourself. So definitely keep track of all the different things that you do. And in our class, we're kind of using OpenLab as one way to help you keep track of that. And you have access to those tools. All right, so that's the 500-word summary. Get that turned in as quickly as you can, and I'll start grading those soon. And for those folks that haven't reached out to me that might need some extra time, just send me an email. Let me know what's going on. All right. Next thing I wanted to mention to you, this is an opportunity, and I'll link to this to our OpenLab site so you have access to it. One of your classmates in the Guinean Student Society had asked me to give a workshop on job hunting, and I did have to say that unfortunately I didn't have time to meet with that group during the club hour meeting time. But what I could do is something that I actually wanted to do for a while for my students, and that was to create kind of like a an asynchronous workshop on job hunting. Because like in my English 1133 class, Advanced Communication for Technology students, part of the class is about job hunting. But in our class, 2575, there's no built-in job hunting unit. I can include that, but then that would take time away from the things that we're required to do. So what I wanted to offer you all and all of my students, from here and going into the future, is access to the same kind of stuff that I teach my English 1133 students. So over this past weekend, I built a new OpenLab site, which you can see here on the screen now. And I'll link to this from our OpenLab course site for our English 2575 course. And what's on this site is all the basic important information that I think that you need to know to be successful in the job search. And so the first part is I made a lecture. It's about an hour and 30 minutes plus a few minutes long, but I go over general things of like researching companies and finding job listings, how to write different types of resumes. If you didn't know this, there are different ways you can write a resume, and I give you information about that. How to write an application letter, remembering like its audience and its purpose as an argument to get you a job interview. And then also just some more practical advice about protecting yourself online, scrubbing your old usernames and old posts that you might have published when you were like a teenager that you don't want people to see now. All this kind of stuff that might be pertinent and useful to give you the best chances when you go look for a job. Now, in addition to this lecture, I included all the documents that I talk about in the lecture. So you can find a sample skills-based resume, including a blank version you can just plug in use it as a template for your own, a sample experience resume, including a blank that you can use for your own. Now, in both of these blank versions, one thing to keep in mind is the tables that I created, I left the lines visible so you can see where they are. Make sure you select the tables and go into the table properties in Microsoft Word to make them invisible. You can do a Google search to find out how to do that. It's very easy. But do that before you actually use these. And you can look at the samples to see what they should look like when they're finished. Okay. Now, I'll also give you a sample job application letter that I talk about in the lecture, so you can kind of follow along with what I say about it in terms of a thesis statement, your supporting evidence, and how to give a good closing. Now, in addition to that, I give you a lot of links that have really good information that I like that might be useful to you. So I give you some general links about where to do job searches and where to create job profiles, job search profiles. Here's links about how to do research on businesses, salary information that might be useful to you. Also tell you how to get a free subscription to the New York Times. I don't think I'd mentioned that in our class yet before, but every City Tech student can get a free digital subscription to the New York Times. You might want to do that even for our class right now for this 750 word expanded definition project that we're working on, because you can cite news articles as a part of the assignment. So I'll remember to mention that again later in this lecture. But you can click this link, use your City Tech email address, and you can sign up for a free 1-year subscription. So definitely do that. Take advantage of it. It's how I read the New York Times. I have a free subscription just like you guys got. I give you more links for resume information from different schools, from Purdue, from Georgia Tech, from the University of Maryland, and also links to important words, like what verbs to use, action verbs to use in your resume. For cover letters, there's more information here, including this good article for the New York Times about how to write a cover letter that whoever you write it to actually reads it. There's information here about interviews, like how to prepare, not just for the questions you get asked, but you should also prepare questions to ask your interviewer at the end of your interview. And there's some examples here how to do that. Then finally, we got some links for general job hunting advice. and then also general writing resources, including the Merriam-Webster Dictionary and Thesaurus online. That thesaurus is really useful for whenever you're wanting to jazz up the language of your application letter. So a lot of good stuff here, including free textbooks. I mean, I love free, especially free that's really high quality stuff. So I included links to stuff like that as well. So all this is is a single page website, but it gives you everything I think that you need to brush up your resumes and your job letters so that you have the best success. And you just keep in mind, we can use my office hours for a lot of different purposes, including talking about job search stuff. So even though that's not a part of our class, I can still talk to you about that stuff if you come to my office hours. So keep that in mind. Wednesdays from 3 until 5, I have online office hours on Google Hangouts. I'll post a link to our OpenLab site to before the office hours begin. So all you got to do is click the link, and then it takes you right to where I'm at. And also, if you don't have that time available, just send me an email with what your availability is for the next week, and I'll get back to you with a time that fits my schedule so that we can both get together. I'll just send you a new link to Google Hangouts and we can talk there. All right, so that's the job search stuff. So now let's get into this next unit that we began working on last week with the weekly writing assignment. All right, so back over here, and yeah, so let's go to the syllabus. So I'm on the syllabus, and I'm going down to week 5. So for week 5, I'm going to lay out what's going to be coming up due for this week's weekly writing assignment, which is going to be that post 3 quotes with bibliographic entries using the term that you've decided on in last week's weekly writing assignment. Then last week's weekly writing assignment is going to become due. And then we're going to be moving ahead with the 750 word expanded definition project. I'm going to show you an example of what that should look like. So let's take a look at the actual assignment. That's up here under grading on the syllabus. So we got it right here. Let me move it up so my head's not in the way. So again, this is an individual project. You do this alone. And you're going to be writing a 750 to 1,000 word expanded definition, which is worth 10% of your grade. Now, what an expanded definition of a technical or scientific term is one in which you look for multiple definitions of the word from different authoritative sources, which means you don't go to Wikipedia, except you can go to Wikipedia and maybe see what their citations are for the word. Those citations will likely lead you to authoritative sources, things you can find through our library, and then you use those sources for actually quoting and giving those definitions. Now, you don't just quote these definitions and leave them sitting on the page. What you have to do is explain these definitions in your own words. Explain what's the meaning behind them. Explain some context for what they mean. The idea being that you want to show how these different definitions are all kind of pointing toward the same idea that that term represents. So in a sense, the beginning of your 750 to 1,000 word expanded definition should be a discussion of these different definitions that you find. And that's going to lead into this week's weekly writing assignment, which I'll talk about toward the end of our lecture today. Now, in addition to finding those definitions, you also want to find quotes in which that word, that term you chose, is used in context. Now, what I mean by in context means that in that sentence, they may not define what that word is, what that term is, but you can see that the word is used in the sentence in relation to other words, in relation to other terms. And what we're curious about is how that word gets used in those sentences. So the idea is you find a few quotes from different sources, and now for that part of the assignment, you can look to other places. Again, not going to Wikipedia, and you hear me harp on Wikipedia, so let me be clear about this. I think Wikipedia is a wonderful website. It's incredibly useful. I use it myself. But for a variety of reasons, it's not a source that we want to quote from when we're looking for the types of quotes, the types of information, the types of citations that we can use as evidence in the types of documents that we're creating. Part of the reason for that is that Wikipedia is a living document, is a living website. What I mean by that is that it's constantly changing. People are always going in and out of the different entries and making changes, and so the page that you may quote from will not look the same as it did, like, say, a year ago or maybe a year from now. So what we want to do is find sources that, when they present the writing, they remain the same as they were, in the past, and they'll remain the same when they're in the future. There's another reason, though, and that is Wikipedia is an aggregator. You know what aggregate means? Aggregate means to pull things together. It means to take things from other places and bring them all together into one spot. So an aggregator is trying to bring information together from other sources to, in a sense, because Wikipedia is a type of encyclopedia, it's an aggregator of information meant to supply its readers with the main idea behind something without having to go into all those separate sources that are cited from to gain that information. It essentially is a way of getting up to speed on an idea very quickly. But the thing about Wikipedia is that it is not the source, the primary source for new knowledge, new information. It's always coming from somewhere else. I mean, you might have noticed that some Wikipedia pages will have a banner at the top because that entry has been flagged, saying that the information has not been properly sourced and cited. And that's because someone just created that Wikipedia entry, just typed up everything they knew in their mind, but didn't go out to any corroborating sources to support, to give evidence for what the hell it was they wrote on the Wikipedia entry. And the thing is that you could think of like a Wikipedia entry for a given term, a technical term, in a sense, is like this expanded definition document that you're going to be creating. The only real difference is that in addition to the definitions, to saying like what the term is and what it means, is that we're wanting to dive a little bit deeper into some of the sources that we can locate through the library to see how the term gets used in different contexts by different writers for different audiences. Okay? So the first part of your 750 to 1,000 word expand definition is going to be you discussing some definitions you find. And in our last lecture, I went over some places where you could find those. Now, in the second part, what you'll want to be looking at is how that term gets used in context. That means, like, how is it getting used just say in like a newspaper article or a magazine article or an academic journal or in our case probably an ebook. And I say ebook because I'm not expecting you to have to go to a library because of the pandemic, but there's a lot of ebooks that we have access to through the library's website, which you can obviously use as sources for this assignment. Now, again, you don't just like quote those sources. Like you take a quote out, you drop it into your document, you give a parenthetical citation at the end, and then your references at the end, you give a bibliographic entry. That's not all you do. After you quote it, you got to tell us something about what's going on in that article or that book that this quote comes from. What is the quote referring to in your own words? So that's the discussion that you want to include with each of these quotes that you use, is to explain to your reader what is going on with it. What does it mean? And you can help us do that by writing that discussion in your own words in conjunction with the quotes that you're drawing our attention to. And then finally, at the end of your document, you'll want to synthesize your own working definition of the term. A working definition is like your go-to, off the top of your head definition for some technical term. It's where if someone were to say, what is an integrated circuit? What is flash memory? In all these cases, like, you probably have an idea in your head what that is, and you would want to be able to supply that very easily. You wouldn't stop and say, well, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it's such and such. And also, according to this authoritative source who wrote a whole book about it, it's this other thing. No, you have off the top of your head synthesized from those readings of those different sources your own idea of like what the term is, and that's what you will supply. And so this expanded definition document you're going to create begins with some authoritative definitions you quote that you discuss. It's going to work into some contextual quotes that you're going to explain to the reader like what they mean and how it may affect what that term means in that for that different context, meaning for that different audience in that different document that you're quoting it from. And then finally, based on what you've learned from those definitions and from those quotes, synthesize, meaning you create based on what you have now learned, synthesize your own working definition of the term. As that's like you put away all the books, you put away all your notes, and you just think, how would I define this term for a peer, meaning someone that's roughly got the same knowledge, same age as you. That's going to be kind of the goal that we're working toward, the audience that I want you to aspire to on this assignment. Now, what would that look like? Let's take a look at that. All right. Now, I'm going to copy and paste this into the post for today's lecture, so you'll have access to this. Actually, I'll probably put it in the post for this week's weekly writing assignment, because that's going to have one part you turn in and then the one part, which is a rough draft, that you're going to continue working on your own. And this document here is kind of like a breakdown of how your document can look. I'm perfectly happy if you want to take a different tact with the way your document gets designed, as long as it's including these same major points in it. Okay, so I'm not saying this is the only way to create your document for this assignment, but it's a very straightforward, direct way to do so. And so you can see that first there's an introduction, and also just to point out, this is a memo format document. So I give you an example of what that would look like. You have an introduction section, which you would give a heading title to. And in the introduction, you say, what is the purpose of this memo? Just like you did with the 500-word summary document. You had to begin with that sentence or so explaining why, what is the purpose of this summary document that you're writing. Then you're going to have a section for definitions, and this is where you quote those definitions that you find through the library sources. Then you're going to have a section for context, and these will be the quotes that come from other sources that aren't really definitions, but how that term gets used in random sentences. So you look for sentences where that term appears. Again, it's very easy. Like if you download, like say, a PDF of a journal article, or you look on a New York Times article that includes the term, on a PC, press Control F, or on a Mac, press Command F, and do a search through the document for that term. See where it appears, and then just zip around. Keep searching over and over. You switch over to Control G or Command G, and then you will be able to go from example to example through the document until you find one that might be a good sentence that you would like to quote from and then discuss in your own words. So that would be the context section. And again, each of these, I give you some more examples about how to do that. And then finally, you're going to have your working definition section. That's where you synthesize based on what you've learned from the definitions and from those contextual examples. What is your working definition in your own words? No need to quote from anywhere else because this should be your own deal. What is your working definition? You would give that there. And then finally, the last section, which would just be titled References, you would want to give ordered by the author's last name, your APA formatted bibliographic reference for everything that you quote in your document. Now, this particular assignment, like its baseline is 3 library source citations. But I would highly recommend that you use more than that, okay? Now, for this week's weekly writing assignment, I'm going to be looking for 3 sources, and I'll tell you how to do that in a minute. But I would really recommend that if you want a really strong expanded definition document, that you're going to want to include more than 3 sources. Excuse me. So the reason for that is the more evidence that you can give in a document like this, the stronger it is. It gives you more to discuss. And also it shows that you've done more work, by doing that research. Maybe if you just need like a ballpark like figure, for definitions, 2 or 3. And for the context quotes, I would suggest maybe 3 or 4. And whenever you're doing your total word count, everything in the document counts, including those quotes. But now what I don't want to see are you to use quotes that are like, a page long. You need to choose only what's relevant for your citations inside the body of your document and then what you're going to discuss. So like a definition typically is like only a sentence long. Your context quotes should only be a sentence long. So no big block quotes for these things. So look for multiple sources to give you plenty to talk about. That's the discussion that you're going to be having with the support of these quotations that you find through your research. And I don't even want you to think about the 750 to 1,000 words. It's roughly 3 to 4 pages double spaced. But if you find these quotes first, write discussion about them, you're going to find when you're looking at your word count, like here at the bottom of Microsoft Word or whatever word processor you're using, you're going to find that word count jacks up very quickly. So don't harp over that. Don't worry about that. The words will come. Do the research first to find good, strong quotes, both for the definitions and for your contextual examples that you're going to write about. So let's see, what's next? All right, so why don't we, again, I'm going to give you a copy of this, so I know that's very small to read on this video, so don't worry about that. Just wanted to kind of give you the gist of it. I mean, you can see the main layout. You got a chunk here for introduction, a chunk there for definitions, a chunk here for context, and then a chunk at the end for your working definition. That's the main idea. And this will all be in a memo format, and you'll use APA formatting both for your parenthetical citations of your quotes as well as for the bibliographic references that go at the end for everything that you quote up inside the document. All right, so I'll give you a copy of that. Now, what I would like to see you do for over this week in preparation for next week. First off, your weekly writing assignment is simply to find 3 quotes from library sources that you can use in your expanded definition document. The idea behind this is you find those quotes, it shows me you're doing the research. I know that if you have the research done, then you discussing that research shouldn't be that heavy a lift. Because, you're choosing topics that you should already know about, that you're interested in. And so now it's just a matter of you're describing in your own words, what do they mean? How do they relate to other ideas, maybe in your major or your career, or maybe how they relate to one another? How does one definition relate to another? In your quotes for the contextual section, what does one mention of the term, how does it relate to the mention of a term in a different source? That's comparing and contrasting. And that can be a part of your discussion. That's an important part of discussion. So the idea here is just find at least 3 quotes. Now, the way that I'd like you to show me those quotes is I would like to see 2 of them be definitions. So you're on quote 2 definitions from 2 different sources. And then the third quote can be one of your context quotes. And so that's just simply a sentence you find through a library source, or as I'll expand this into also web sources, an example of how that term gets used. And so you're going to have 3 quotes. I want to see them in quotation marks and with a parenthetical citation at the end for each of those quotes. And then after each quote, okay, I'd like to see an APA bibliographic reference. So you're going to have quote with a parenthetical citation, skip a line, and then I'm going to see the bibliographic reference for that quote. Skip a line, your second quote. Skip a line, you're going to have the bibliographic reference. Skip a line, third quote. Skip a line, and then your third bibliographic reference. And all those quotes and those references you're going to be able to use in your 750 word expanded definition document. But that's something that we're going to get to in a second. Just to turn this in, you're just going to copy those 3 quotes with those bibliographic references, copy them into a comment on this week's weekly writing assignment post that I will put up on our OpenLab course site. Okay, so just like you've turned in things before for the weekly writing assignments as a comment, it'll be exactly the same. You don't have to format it as a memo. All I need to see are those 3 quotes with their 3 bibliographic references. Okay, and I'll write all this up on OpenLab, so don't think that you're going to miss anything. But obviously right now, I didn't mention it before, but you should be making notes of all this because it may help you remember and give you a little more info than the little bit I'm going to type up on our OpenLab site. You imagine I'm not like creating transcripts from all this talking that I'm doing. So you have to use the lecture with what I provide with on OpenLab. And to do that easily is to make notes on these lectures. That's for your benefit, and that gives you practice, because when you're in the workplace, you damn well sure ought to be taking notes when you go to a meeting or when you pass your manager in the hallway and he tells you to do something or she tells you to do something. Always have like a notepad or something handy so you can jot things down, or your phone, you can type it in. That's also fair game. All right, so that's the weekly writing assignment. Now, I'll also mention this on our OpenLab site, but I'm going to tell you right now, I also need you to be working toward a first draft of your 750 word expanded definition project. Now, the rough draft doesn't necessarily need to be the full 750 words, but it does need to be substantive enough that next week, for next week's weekly writing assignment, we're going to be doing peer review again, which means you're going to circulate a copy of your first draft to your team that we used before. So that way you already are familiar with these folks. But to help you out, next week, I'll do just like I did the week previous, where I send out an email to each team to begin the process of peer review. That way, everything that you circulate not only goes between you and your teammates, but I can also see the work that you're doing, because that's valuable work that you do in peer review. I value it, and it should be something that you make a part of your writing practice to become a better writer, because when you get in the workplace, you're going to be needing to do that again. That's just the way we make our writing better, is by sharing it with others and getting their feedback on it. So this isn't something like, I don't want you to think of it as like busy work. This is a part of a process that's been around for a very long time, has been proven to work, and I want to give you a lot of practice with it. And so it's always best practice that I see in the effort that you give that gives you all the credit on these weekly writing assignments. It's when I see someone like not do the work or do it half-assed that they can become a problem. And I don't think so far people are doing that. You guys have been taking the class spirit to heart. I appreciate that, because it shows that you got drive. It shows me that you really want this, not just want a good grade in the class, but you want these skills because you realize these skills are going to give you that edge when you're going for the jobs that you want. Because I understand you are all not going to be technical writers, right? You're going to different technical fields, but writing is a big part of the work that you have to do. And there's not going to be someone else to do that for you when you get there. You have to be prepared to wear a lot of different hats in the workplace nowadays. One of the things that you're going to find if you listen to the job application lecture that I made is that one of the main things to keep in mind when you're applying for jobs is that it always comes down to what value you can add to the company, right? That when you're applying for a job, don't talk about how it's going to be a great experience for you or what that company is going to do for you, because a manager, some corporate person, they don't care about that. All they care about is like, are you going to be able to do the job? Are you going to do the job well? Can you work well with others? Are you able to communicate well with others? All these questions relate to like how much value you can bring to the company to get the work of the company done efficiently, expertly, and with as little friction as possible so that the company can keep making money. And so the idea here is like, how many hats can you wear? How many hats can you show a company you can support in terms of your skill set? You're obviously all becoming well-versed in different technical fields that you study in your majors. But the other important aspect of it is like, are you a good communicator? Are you able to work on a team and communicate with a team? Are you able to communicate well with a manager? These types of things can be make or break whether you're successful in the workplace once you get the job, but also important about being able to get your foot in the door to get the job in the first place. And I see a lot of the folks in the class are aspiring to that, and that makes me feel good about like this group of students that are together with me this semester in our class. And as I said before, like everything you bring in the class, I'm going to bring that and more. Because my idea is like, I want you all to be successful, and I see you working hard toward that. I'm going to do everything in my power to help you be successful, and I'm honest about that. Now, so for this week's weekly writing assignment, the main thing is to find 3 sources through the library, and we'll go take a look at the library again in just a second. But you got to find 3 sources. I would like 2 of those to be definitions of the term from different places, and 1 of those to be a context quote. That is a quote that just shows the term being used in some place. Okay, it doesn't have to define the term. You're going to explain what the term means in the sentence later in the project. You're going to copy and paste those 3 quotes along with APA citations into a comment on our OpenLab site, and I'll give you a place to do that tomorrow, Wednesday, when I post all this. On your own, okay? I don't need to see this, but this is kind of wrapped up into your weekly writing assignment to prepare for next week. I need you to be working toward a first draft of your expanded definition memo. And you can use this example that I give you, that I'm going to put on our OpenLab site. You can just copy and paste this into your draft memo, and then just take out my words that I've written here as examples and advice and put your writing there, okay? That way you got a good structure, and then you know exactly what you need to be doing in each section of the document. You're going to hold on to that until next week when I announce next week's weekly writing assignment, which will be peer review again. And I'll help you with that. And just so everybody knows, I don't want you to think I'm having a senior moment. I do like to repeat things in order to make sure that everybody's on the same page with me and with one another in the class, because I know that these lectures being on video can sometimes be disorienting compared to like when we're meeting in person and having a lecture. But as I mentioned before, if you have questions, just pause the video, backtrack, watch it again, make notes while you're listening to me talk, because that makes you more engaged, and being more engaged helps you pick up on things that you might miss if you're just like listening and zoning out, okay? You don't want to zone out when you're watching lectures for your classes. Bad idea, okay? So be as engaged as possible, and by taking notes, it actually helps you do that. All right, so we've gone over the weekly writing assignment where you find 3 quotes and give the APA citations, and we talked about working toward a draft of your 750 word expanded definition document. All right, so I guess in this last part, let's just kind of go back over to the library's website and just make sure everybody remembers how to find some of this stuff. So just go to library.citytech.cuny.edu. And from here, we're able to access a lot of stuff online. So, I'm not having any expectation that you go into the library or that you have to be around other people right now beyond like what you may have to do on your own, okay? So I've designed this where I think that you'll be able to find everything you need through these different websites. So from this very first page, you can see here for Find, we have by default right now selected ebooks. And this might be a good time just to begin looking not for the definition of your term, which we talked more about in last week's lecture, but to find some examples of the term being used in some different sources. Now, I had mentioned before, I think in last week's lecture, that for those contextual quotes, you might want to look in different sources that are aimed toward different audiences, okay? Now, in order to maybe illustrate this most strongly, I will post a link on our OpenLab site where I post our lecture, a link to a list of YouTube videos that were produced by Wired Magazine. If you're not familiar, Wired Magazine is a technology and culture magazine that's been around since the 1990s. Very important magazine. And what they did with these videos is they found an expert in different fields to explain one topic, much like you guys are doing on the Expanded Definition Project. But what their task in these videos is to explain that topic to different audiences. The most basic audience is usually like a school-aged child, and then maybe someone that is in high school, and then maybe someone that's in college, and then finally maybe someone who's got like a PhD or is in graduate school. And what you'll find in each of those videos, and what I would recommend after you click that link, watch a couple of them just to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But in those videos, you're going to see the person first try to figure out kind of like what that audience already knows, and then begin to fill in the gaps of their knowledge about in relationship to the term that they want to explain. And so for the child, they're having to work in very basic terms in order to illustrate some of these technical topics they discuss. For like the high school and college levels, they're able to, they don't have to build as much background in, but they have to build a little background for the deficiencies in knowledge that those audiences have in order to understand the topic. But then for that someone that's also an expert or an aspiring expert, they can have more of a conversation about it rather than just an explanation from the expert to the novice. So they can kind of help you understand a little bit about how to address different audiences. And the bottom line for any audience you're trying to reach out to is you need to know what that audience is. You have to figure out what they already know in relationship to what you want to help them better understand, and then build in a good approach to supplying the information that they need to understand in an efficient and impactful way that meets them already on the level where they're at, and then elevates them to the level that you want them to be based on what you communicate to them. Now, this isn't easy work. It's something you get better at over time, but I think at the core of it is not to make too many assumptions about your audience or even to ignore your audience. You have to, in some cases, it's advisable to reach out to that audience beforehand to kind of find out what they might know so that you can craft your communications as effectively as possible. So, hold on just one second to get a sip of water. Okay, so here we are on the library's website. So why don't I type in a term? How about, what would be a good term? I mentioned before integrated circuit. So integrated circuit. Maybe overly broad for this project, but it'll bring up a lot of different things. Now, because we were searching in ebooks to begin with, you can see over here on the right, we already got some active filters, including books and full text online, meaning that it's only going to show us stuff that we can actually read online, which is useful for us because we can't easily go to a library right now because of the pandemic. But we can look through these books and get a sense of from the titles, what they're about. And obviously integrated circuits, have a lot of different applications. So there could be some of these books are too specific or too out there for what you might want to talk about. Because talking about integrated circuits for radio transmission devices is very different than talking about integrated circuits maybe for computational devices, for example. And so you have to kind of browse through these titles to kind of see what might give you something interesting to quote from. So if we wanted to look at something that's more cutting edge, here's this book about 3D integrated circuits. So if I wanted to read this, you see this link here where it says available online. I'm just going to click that. And then it's going to bring me to this section where view online, and it says try link below. Some of the books might actually have multiple links, and so if one doesn't work for whatever reason, just click on the next one until you get one that actually opens the book for you. But this one only has one link, so I'm just going to click it. It's going to open in a new tab. I'm off campus, so it's going to redirect me to log in. Okay, I got my username password in. I'm going to log in. All right, so here it brought me to the Wiley Online Library. It brought me directly to the book, and so I'm just going to click the title to open it up. So some of the books that you find, you might have a link where you can download the full book like this. Sometimes, though, you can only read one chapter at a time, and there may be a link for the PDF for each chapter, so that way you don't have to download the whole thing, or you may not be allowed to download the whole thing. Each of these ebooks are going to be a little different depending on which provider, meaning the publisher, decides to make them available to us. So you will have to do a little experimentation in order to find, in order to learn how to read these different ebooks. Usually, though, it's straightforward, and many of you should already be quite savvy online. But I don't want you to get too frustrated. If you have trouble, send me an email. Let me maybe include a link to the resource you're trying to access so I can see why you're having trouble with it. But with this case, I'm going to click this link for download full book. So it's downloading and it's opened here in my browser. Now if I wanted to, I can choose to download it, like here in Firefox, I got a link to download it, and you'd have similar links if you're in Chrome or Safari. But for right now, I can just browse through this using my browser. Now, for this week's weekly writing assignment, I'm asking you to give me quotes and to do a parenthetical citation and to do a bibliographic reference. So what I would recommend is leave the sources open that you're looking at, go to a new tab, just do a search for Purdue OWL APA. So that we can go to the Purdue OWL website, and that way we can get access to the in-text citations. That's the parenthetical citations I keep mentioning. Okay, you know this from our previous project, so it's nothing new, but I want to make sure you know how to get back to examples. And then also for your reference list, that's the bibliographic entry part. And so these are books, so reference list books. And then here I have the basic format for books. And then you can see there's other examples here for edited books, edited book with an author or authors, translations, etc. So, I mean, you can find a lot of examples here. Part of your job is to read through this and find examples that match like what you're working on. The thing about like these your different professional styles for citing your work is that I'm not going to like quiz you on whether you can remember how the styles work. What I expect you to do is use these resources that I show you to see how to format your own sources that you're quoting from. If you have questions about it, please reach out to me. Like if we were in class, it would be one thing where I can like just walk around the room and people would ask me questions. It's more difficult when we're working asynchronously like this. But certainly send me an email or come to my office hours and I can help you sort these things out. But part of the work in the class is also to read and to try to understand and learn from these examples that we can find in these style guides like the Purdue OWL website. So I leave this open, like if I'm doing my own work, I leave this website open in its own tab so I can go back to my tab where I'm doing my research reading and I can make notes like, so like I can see on the title page for this book that is edited, right? So for edited book with an author or authors, I got an example here, right? So I can use these models to collect the information that I need for my bibliographic reference that'll go in my references section of my document. Got the editors. I got the title of the book. This is the title. You put a colon right there, and then this is the subtitle. I can see that it was published by Wiley-VCH, would be the publisher. And then scrolling down to the copyright page, I can see that it was copyrighted, published in 2008. So I've already got a lot of the information that I need from this over here. Author, year publication, title of work, subtitle, editors, publisher, and if there is a DOI, we would include that. But in this case, this is going back to the library's website. I don't see it. But I do see something else I'm going to show you. So the one thing that I don't have yet is the author name. Because, all right, so let me explain with an edited book. Some of these books that you find have editors who are in charge of what goes in it. But then the writing for all the different chapters will be by different authors. So if you find a quote in like one chapter of this book, you're going to be quoting it from that one author's chapter that they wrote rather than from the book as a total. And this actually is a better example that you might want to use. I would say this is where you want to look instead of that example up above. Article or chapter in an edited book. This is where you're actually looking at a single author's chapter in that book. All the information is the same. You have the authors, your publication, title of work. You have the editor's names, title of work, the pages, the publisher, and the DOI if it's available, which in this case is not. So use this right here, article or chapter in an edited book for this particular example that we're looking at, the Handbook of 3D Integrated Circuits. All right, so we are here at the table of contents, but what I'm going to do is press Command F, so that's going to bring up my search box for this document, and I'm going to type in integrated circuit. And you can see that is 3 of 124 matches. And so I can just click this right arrow and it's going to take me to the next example. So here's integrated circuits in this sentence. And I'm looking for the page number. This is in the preface. The focus of this book is the technology of applications of 3D integration, which we classify as the vertical integration of thinned and bonded silicon integrated circuits with vertical electrical interconnects between the integrated circuits, the IC layers. So in a sense, this is kind of a definition of 3D integration in which the term integrated circuits appears. This would actually be a good sentence, I think, to use in context in that context section of your expanded definition document, because you'd be able to say in your own words, here we have an example of a definition for 3D integration, a more advanced and cutting-edge technique for layering of integrated circuits. We see in this example the term integrated circuits used to help define this more advanced term of 3D integration. And so you're able to begin making linkages, connections between the term you're interested in this example, integrated circuits, and this other technique that they're talking about in this book, which is 3D integration. And so the only other thing that we would need from this is, we know this is the preface. So the preface is usually written by the editors of the book. So we have the author's names, and we also have the page and pages that the preface appears on. So for your parenthetical citation at the end of this quote, you would include the editor's names as being the authors, and then you would include that page number, XV, or let's see, we have name, just to make sure. Again, I keep this open because I want to make sure always that I'm doing it right. So in-text citations, basics. So we want name, year, and page number. This example right here, this is the parenthetical citation that they're given an example of, okay? So author, comma, year, comma, and then page number. In this case, the author's name would be all the editors, comma, the year of publication, what was that, 2008, comma, PP, period, space, XVII, Roman numerals for page 17. And so that would be the page number, XVII. Now for our bibliographic entry for this quote, we would want to know that beginning page number of the preface, XVII, dash, we scroll down, and it's only 2 pages long, so is PP XVII dash XVIII for 17 to 18. So all the information we need is right here. All we got to do is look for it. Again, keep that other tab open to the Purdue OWL website so you can use that as a reference. Now, also just as a reminder, going back over to the library website for this book, you see I got some stuff here. EndNote, export, BibTeX, EasyBib, export RIS, citation. So I can click this link, citation, and it's going to give me a lot of the information that I might need, and I can click different ways of citing it, and we want APA, so I'm going to click APA. And then it formats it in a way that I need for my bibliographic entry. The only difference being is I would have to adjust this to say that I'm only looking at a part of the book, right? Because I'm only looking at the preface of this book to find that quote. And that's where we go back over to the Purdue OWL website. So Purdue OWL website, I'm looking over here in the formatting, reference list, books. And I remember I corrected myself, and so we want to go down to article or chapter in an edited book. So what we would do is change that citation the libraries give us. You can copy all that to begin with, because a lot of it's right. But look here, we got to add the title of the chapter, that's preface. And then we need to add this part here at the end before the publisher's name for the pages that the preface appears on. So that'd be PP period space XVII dash XVIII 17 to 18 in Roman numerals. But everything else would remain the same. So use some of these tools that the library gives you like to help you out. It's perfectly fine. But I also want you to double check things. Because notice here, they say the publication date of this work is 2011. I'm looking back at this. Title page, copyright page, and it's possible that they did publish a version of this in 2011, but the only date we got is 2008, so we got to change that to 2008 for the publication date. So always double check anything that the library or the databases might give you for a citation, because there can be small mistakes, and that falls on you to make sure that you correct them. And in our class, it may not matter that much, but when you're working on something for your workplace, it matters a whole hell of a lot, okay? So pay attention to those things. All right, so that's ebooks. And so I'm going to go back to the library's website. All right, so for this project, I said primarily I want you to be looking for vetted sources for the definitions. Those will be things that you find through the databases, through the different like dictionary and encyclopedia sources that I mentioned before. And to find those again, if we go to like research guides, and for most cases, if we go to like computer engineering and systems technology, and then go to encyclopedias, through some of these sources, we likely can find definitions. You can also find definitions in some of the ebooks, though you do sometimes have to do a little bit of digging to find that first time that term gets mentioned might be where they give a definition of the term. Because, I mean, they want to establish what are they talking about, so they'll likely give some definition to work with at the beginning. Maybe in an introduction, maybe in a preface. You can also find definitions occasionally in journal articles, though sometimes it requires more digging to do that. For this kind of research, this is something where you're going to have to sit down and spend time using these tools, both the digital references sources here, as well as the ebooks that we have access to, and then also articles that you find through some of these databases that we've talked about before. Academic Search Complete, Applied Science, Science Direct, the Springer eJournals, Wiley Online, and then also don't forget going back over to the library's website, going down to Find Articles, and then going to I, so we can go to IEEE Explore, which also has a lot of stuff that would be relevant to many of the folks in the class. So all these different places might be useful sources for your definitions. But now for the context quotes, where you're simply looking for the way that word gets used in a sentence, you can look in the ebooks, you can look in the journals, which are held in these databases that you've already used before. You can also use periodicals. And so for periodicals, one place to go for that, which I've already mentioned before, but I'll mention again, is for L's, and that's LexisNexis. LexisNexis is a database primarily of newspapers and magazines. But you can also use your free New York Times subscription. So again, use that link that I put on that job application site, or you can just type this into your browser right now, nytimes.com/passes, okay? nytimes.com/passes. It's going to bring you to this page here to create an account. You put in your CityTech email address so they know that you're a student here at CityTech, which is what qualifies you for your free subscription. Follow the prompts to create a password. After you've done that, You log into the New York Times website, nytimes.com, and you have access to everything. You can find articles going back to the beginning of the newspaper, all for free. This is something otherwise you'd have to pay a lot of money for. But because you're a student at City Tech, you get this benefit for free. It's yours for the taking. So this would be a good place to find a context quote for the term that you're looking for. And then finally, you can also go to websites that you find through a Google or other search engine site. So like, if I were to, what I would recommend if you're looking for a term that might be 2 or 3 words, make sure you put it in quotes. Integrated. The reason why I put it in quotes is to make sure Google understands I want to see those 2 words as a phrase, not seen separately in different places on the website. So I get like dictionary.com, which actually this is from Oxford Languages, so you might be able to find that's Oxford English Dictionary, but don't use this site that's on Google because obviously this is not the OED that we pay for through the library, which is much more robust, meaning it has a lot more stuff in it, more useful stuff. We can see the Wikipedia article. Again, don't use that for one of your cited sources. But scrolling down, SparkFun, this is can have some interesting information, but this is probably like primarily a clickbait site. techterms.com, TechTarget, explain that stuff. But here we're coming to pbs.org. This is public broadcasting service. So this actually might be a much more informed site rather than these rando websites. I mean, who the hell knows what explainthatstuff.com is? Who made that website? This is a site that's at the top of the search results, not because a lot of people are linking to it necessarily, but more than likely they're doing search engine optimization to land at the top of the results. But pbs.org, we know what they are. We know that they provide a public service to educate the citizens of the United States. So this might be like a good place to find out how they might use integrated circuits on a sentence on their website. Dictionary.com, we're going to skip over that. And so we'll keep going in the search results. Got some YouTube results. ELPROCUS, how integrated circuits, why. Not sure what that is. Anysilicon.com, tel.com, dummies.com. That actually might be informative because the dummies line of books are meant to be basic explainers of different concepts. They actually can be quite useful to learning something quickly. So this would be a website that I wouldn't have any problem with like recommending you take a look at. Webipedia, Made How. I mean, these rando websites. Though HitachiHightech.com, that's interesting that they would have a website that goes over this. I wonder if that's actually affiliated with Hitachi. But now let me show you something else that might streamline your results. So one way to do this is if like we knew of a website that might give us useful information. So like let's say Intel. We know Intel is a maker of integrated circuits and microprocessors. So what if I were to tell Google site:/intel.com? And so now I'm getting I'm getting search results only from Intel's website that uses the phrase integrated circuit. Is a job posting. That may be where you guys want to work. So you may want to take a look at that. You could use a quote from a job search listing as a context quote for your expanded definition. Here you have from their newsroom. This is where they give press releases. That would be something that would be valuable to cite from. This is some other kind of document they have there from Sanda Circuits. That might be interesting to look at. So all of these would be, I think, much more high quality results than from some of the rando websites that I didn't know where the hell they were, who made them or where they came from. Whereas these results I know are coming from a company that is involved in building integrated circuits, and they have been for a very long time. I could also change that to How about edu? What this does is it uses the top level domain name of edu and shows me only results that are from school, college, university-based websites. So I get this one from University of Illinois, nap.edu. I'd have to click that to find out where that is. Here, americanhistory.si, that's the Smithsonian Institution. They have a .edu website. So that's definitely going to be a valuable source to take a look at for the context part of my document. So again, the idea is that for the definition, make sure you're using vetted sources from the library. For the context section, you can still use vetted sources from the library, but you may expand it to include some that come from some just web searches. But be aware of where that information comes from. You need to discuss that as a part of your document to let your audience know, like, who is doing this writing? What is its purpose? Because if it's some completely rando, sketchy Russian website, why would you be using that for your context quotes when you would more probably usefully look at sources that give you, in a sense, like more valuable use of those words by sources that we can speak to as being experts or knowledgeable about those particular topics. So again, in this part of the project, the context quotes, in a sense, you need to be vetting the sources and thinking about where they come from. Not to say that all sources are off the board, but you need to explain where they come from, who wrote them, and why they're useful for our understanding about how the term you chose is used in these different examples. So just to quickly recap, I'll write all this up on OpenLab. This week's weekly writing assignment, I need to see 3 quotes from library sources. 2 of those would be definitions of your term. 1 of those would be a context use of the term in a sentence. Make sure you use quotes. Give a parenthetical in-text citation at the end of each of those, and then give a bibliographic reference for each after you give the quote. That's all you got to write. No, don't worry about the memo, nothing else. Pay attention to some of these particulars, these details, because I just want you to signal that you're listening to those things by following what I'm asking you to do. There will be other times you do need to give all your responses as a memo, but in this case, all I need to see is your response with the 3 quotes and the 3 references. On your own, don't post this on our OpenLab site, but on your own, begin writing that first draft of your 750-word expanded definition project. This will be something that you're going to share and peer review for next week's weekly writing assignment. So get as much of it done as you can, but again, it doesn't have to be completely done. But the more that you have written, the better for you, because then you get more advice before you finalize it to then turn into me in a couple of weeks. Okay? If you got any questions, I got my office hours Wednesday, 3 to 5 p.m. on Google Hangouts. I'll give you a link on our OpenLab site. And of course, email me with anything else about whether you need to meet with me, if you have a question, whatever it might be. But I would just want to say that I think you guys are doing great work. I appreciate the energy and the attention that you've put into the things you've done so far. And if there's any way that I can help you all be successful in whatever way needs to be happening, don't hesitate to reach out to me, okay? Because I am here, even though we're separated, by the various distances. I'm still reachable, and I definitely want to be here for each and every one of you to be successful in my class, okay? So good luck with our work. Good luck in your other classes and in your lives. Be safe and be well. And I'll talk to you all again soon.